Welcome to Make It Clear Talk. Why didn't politicians follow the simplest advice? Are we witnesses of great empire dusk again? Should we impose war tax? And what can economists learn from the natural science? Today, we have very distinguished guests. As the member of President Reagan's Economic Policy Advisory Board, he participated in a fair successful try to make America great again in 1980s. Later, he repeated it once again as the economic advisor of President Donald Trump, father of the supply-side economics, author of the most famous curve in the modern economic history, and a passionate biologist who once considered forsaking economics for a career in biology. Fortunately for the prosperity of many countries and for the economic science itself, he didn't do it. President Donald Trump honored him with Medal of Freedom for bringing great opportunity for all Americans. President Trump said, "Few people in history have revolutionized economic theory like him." Academics called his theory insanity, totally wacky and completely off the wall. With optimism, confidence, and exceptional intellect, he would go on to prove them all wrong on a number of occasions. Let me to welcome here the brave economist, Professor Laffer. Mr. Professor, thank you for joining us.
It is my pleasure. Let me also say that I've worked for many Democrats. John F. Kennedy, I'm a Kennedy Democrat. I did Jerry Brown's flat tax. I supported Bill Clinton when he was president. So I work both sides of the aisle, depending upon their economics. but that's true. I have had all those in the background, and thank you very much for having me.
Mr. Professor, in these days, you have celebrated your birthday. By the way, congratulations. And during your marvelous career, you have witnessed the dusk of the British Empire, dominance of the United States, bipolarism during the Cold War, Japanese attempt to surpass United States, and now possibly the return of China and the new multipolarism. How did the world change in terms of economic centers, according to you?
Well, let me, if I can, just describe quickly and briefly a few of the highlights. In 1945, in the United States, the highest marginal income tax rate was 94%. Every dollar you earned, you were allowed to keep 6 cents, okay? Since that time, we have brought those tax rates down to where today the highest marginal income tax rate, I think, is 37%. The corporate rate has gone from 52% down to 20%. These 1976, there was only one state in the United States that did not have a death tax, a state death tax. Today, I think 40 states have gotten rid of their death taxes. If you look at the world, its evolution back in I think it was 1947, every state in the United States, except for Arkansas and Florida, had a forced union labor force. You had to be a member of a union to be in labor force. Only those 2 states were right-to-work states. Now, much more than half of the states in the United States are right-to-work. So we've made enormous progress over the last, I would say over the last 75 years in this country, and freeing. We now have free markets in transacting stocks. We have free markets in trucking regulations and retail. I could go on and on. So the world has been moving very much in our direction. Now it moves back and forth and jumps and ups and downs depending on which politician comes in. But the earth, and the US especially, has been moving very much in a positive direction. That's sort of my summary of the sort of the wave of the last 75 years.
Thank you. It sounds optimistic. On the other hand, if you look at the brief data, when you were born, by the beginning of the Second World War, the US debt to GDP was about 49%. Today, it's about 127%. US used to have the biggest balance of payment surplus worldwide. Now, US suffers from the world biggest balance of payment deficit worldwide. It used to be the number one in terms of innovations, patents, science. Now it seems to be, at least in data, which can be fixed, of course, rolled over by China. So can we see the decline of used to be power, or is that just some hibernation which is typical and normal for every empire, every power of the world?
Let me, if I can, just a few other observations in the points you make, and you are correct in those points. But right after World War II, I think our debt as a share of GDP was 130% of GDP. Today, it is 130% of GDP, now for a very different reason. And it went way down there. We removed our debt most specifically after World War II by running surpluses in the budget, but also by growing really rapidly. So the denominator increased dramatically. Now, this time our debt has increased and enormously from, let's say, pre-Reagan on. It's just gone way up. And it's been done by social spending, which I believe is a huge problem. And again, if you tax people who work and you pay people who don't work, do not be surprised if you find a lot of people not working. Just talking economics. My problem today is not tax rates so much. We've done a pretty good job on tax rates. Now we have the huge increase in social spending, which is an enormous problem. It's a new set of problems for us, and it has led to a very sharp decline in U.S. growth rates. That is a huge problem. But, you know, economic growth can solve a lot of problems.
And the position of United States among the multipolar world, because if I make it clear, there's the G7 with United States on the top. Then we have so-called BRICS countries, which seems to get some momentum. So are we witness of some new world order, as it's often said, of some multipolarism, or do we have still the bipolarism, or is there still the hegemony of the United States? Because I will explain that. No. We are living, in the country which was under the communism for 40 years. And the United States for us used to be something as really the big shiny town on the hill, yeah, the Reagan-like, beautiful, marvelous heaven. But nowadays, we lost the place where we want to look up, which we are fixed to, which we want to be the leading power for us, yeah?
Yes. Let me, I understand exactly where you're coming from and what you're saying, and all of that's true. And we'd love to be your example. The shining city on the hill is the role we want to play. We want to be the best behaved person in the world. We're not. We're just human beings like every other people. We're subject to the same politics, the same political pressures, the same appetites, the same tendencies towards sin or towards goodness. Do not make Americans different from anyone else. I can remember in 1979 at the Bel Air Hotel in Los Angeles, there were 10 of us there with the governor, former governor of California, Ronald Reagan, and who was going to become his national security advisor, Dick Allen. And we were meeting to discuss the future of the election and what was going to happen in the campaign. And the governor asked Dick Allen to summarize the history of the post-war period from a U.S. perspective. And Dick Allen was a very funny person, very good, full of jokes and laughs. And he said, well, you see, sir, we've been doing basically two things during the post-war period. We've been harassing our friends, and we've been cajoling our enemies. And Reagan looked at him, Governor Reagan then looked at him and turned his head a little bit and said, excuse me, Dick, what did you say? He said, sir, we've been cajoling our enemies and harassing our friends. He said, well, Dick, what has been the consequence of those policies during the post-war period? He said, well, you see, sir, we have almost no friends left, but we have lots of enemies. So that was the story then. Hold on just a second. Thank you, God. Just Allison on. Sorry about that. But we have almost no friends left. And then Reagan looked at Dick Allen with a quizzical look. He looked at him and he said, well, you know, Dick, this is unacceptable. we can't continue these policies. We're going to have to change these policies. Now, I'm going to describe it in words that were not said then, but the meaning of the words. We're going to have to scare the bejabbers out of our enemies with Star Wars. And we're going to have to make our friends stinking rich with supply side economics. At that moment, I knew that the earth had shifted 180 degrees and that we were in a new era of growth. And then after Reagan, we had Reagan and then George Herbert Walker Bush, who was no good, but not terrible, but just no good. Then we got a great president in Bill Clinton. I mean, Bill Clinton cut government spending as a share of GDP, exempt. I could just go through. He was a wonderful president. And then we got, then we got we got Obama, we got a whole period of bipartisan ignorance and bad policies until we got to Trump. And when Trump, he did very good economic policies. Now I'm talking economics only here. You please don't confuse anything else in this. And then we got hit with a pandemic and boom, the whole thing blew up and here we are today. But the US goes through these long periods. We're slightly different than other countries as the politics actually changes results. I don't know of any other country that really is true. You can really change direction in the US through elections. And, we've been following it sort of two views of the world. One is the growthists, which I'm sort of part of, the supply side economics, those people who believe that economic growth is the answer. People work because they get paid after tax. People invest because they make an after-tax rate of return. When you raise taxes, sometimes you get more revenue, sometimes you get less revenues. These are obvious, simple things there. That's the model of growth. The redistributionists, Keynesians, and let me just say, there's some of my best friends are Keynesians, but they believe people work because they're jobs, not because they're paid. Some people believe that they save because their incomes are high. If you notice the Keynesian model, it's the marginal propensity to save out of income that has nothing to do with the after-tax return. They believe that if you raise tax rates, you will collect more tax revenues dollar for dollar. And that is the world that we came into in the 1970s when Bob Mundell and I had all of these problems. And we won, they lost. And for good reason. The economy after Reagan was pretty good. The economy of John F. Kennedy was great. Kennedy cut the highest tax rate in America from 91% to 70%. He cut the corporate rate from 52 to 48%. He tried to cut it further, but the Republicans blocked him. John F. Kennedy did the Kennedy round tariff negotiation, cutting taxes on traded products by a large amount. I mean, all of this Kennedy cut government spending. I mean, it was an amazing period of prosperity, the same way as Reagan. Reagan and Kennedy were almost identical people, but of different parties. And it's just a beautiful example to see. And there are other examples in American history like that. And we're going through a bad period right now of a period of people who think they can direct the economy from the top down. They've always thought they can do that, especially those people who come from lesser backgrounds and who have gone into economics because they wanted to control things. And you know the people I'm talking about. I mean, my view of the economy, and forgive me just with you, but I believe it's a miracle that the economy of the world, like evolution, like the universe, like all of these things, is a miracle of how the system works. And when I look at it, the last thing I want to do is stick my finger into it and poke it. I want to sit there and jokingly worship it. Zion ever forgot. You look at this world and you say, how is that possible? You remember Milton Friedman's story of the pencil, and how it's just an amazing thing, and I love it. These other people, and I could tell you all of them in Washington, but everyone in Washington today wants to study the economy so they can control it and manipulate it to their ends. And we've always been having these battles between the growthists and the redistributionists, and sometimes we win, sometimes they win. When they win, the economy goes down. When we win, the economy goes up. People forget, and then they vote them in again. And that's sort of the way it is right now. And trade, China, you talk about China. I was the first American to go to China in modern times, the first American. I went in October of 1970 when I was in the White House with George Shultz and John Ehrlichman. And I didn't like China, communists. Well, I went to China and I fell head over heels in love with China. I absolutely, if you could see my office here, you would see all my Chinese paraphernalia. I just love. I think China and the US are perfect mates in this world. Comparative advantage would make China and the United States the two best trading partners in the world. And I hope that's the way things go. I'm all for free trade. Now, not in nuclear weapons to North Korea. Okay, we all understand the exceptions, but the gains from trade are so very important. And if China does well, I'm not upset. In fact, if China does well, I applaud. I think it's the most wonderful thing that's happened to China. From 1970 until today, the greatest reduction in poverty on the earth has occurred through China. They cut their tax rates. I mean, in 1970, and I specialize in China, in 1970, I think it was 94% of all domestic production went through state-run enterprises. Today, that's down to 8%. That's a tax cut. In 1992, China pegged the yuan to the US dollar. They outsourced their monetary policy to Alan Greenspan. Their inflation rates, which had been going like that, all of a sudden, bang, they stabilized and, brought back monetary stability. China's trade as a share of their GDP, if you plotted that number, it's gone way, way up. They have put in policies of tax cuts, sound money, and free trade, and the results have been spectacular. How am I not to love those results? This is what I dream of, whether it's for the Czech Republic, whether it's for Russia, whether it's for China, whether it's for the United States, whether it's for Canada, Europe. Prosperity of humans is my dream in life. So I'm not worried about China. I love China. And I'm not worried about the US. I just hope we don't blow each other up with weapons. But,
That's great to hear, because a lot of outstanding American economists do respect China as the important economic, which will be, once again, an important player on the economic field. Unfortunately, for example, in the Czech Republic, in the European Union as well, the Czech government has its plan for this election period. One statement which says that we should be aware of China and Russia, which doesn't allow us to follow the China science, China policy, and so on. So personally, I think we should be not the enemies, but not the friends. We should respect it.
Thank you. Respect them and love them and do business with them. If you do business with someone and they pay you money, you tend to like them more if they don't do business with you and don't pay you money. Business causes relationships to become friendships. And, autarky and prohibitions cause people to become enemies. In this world, we have plenty of room for good relationships. Now, that doesn't mean that you aren't well protected and well defended and all of that. But first, try business friendships, love rather than hate is the model of my world. And that's where I come out on all of this. And respect economics. Don't use it as a weapon. Don't use it to practice a new theory that is stupid on the face of it. Have you ever heard of an economy taxed into prosperity? No, it doesn't happen. Have you ever heard of a poor person spending himself into wealth? No. Let me, if I can, go on with you for a few seconds here, if you don't mind, and just talk to you about my philosophy of government. We have a world here of economics, and I'm talking macroeconomics. And I believe the 5 pillars of prosperity. And these relate to the 5 major areas of macroeconomics. First is taxes. All taxes are bad, but some taxes are worse than others. What you should do is collect your revenues in the least bad fashion. All right. Basically, what this means is you want a low rate, broad-based, flat tax with the broadest base with the no exceptions, exemptions, exclusions, or omissions, the lowest rate possible to thereby not to incentivize people to avoid or evade, otherwise not report taxable income, and the least places to where they can put that income to avoid paying taxes. This is the North Star, a low rate, broad-based flat tax on spending. Government is really important in this world. It has a beautiful role to play. But when you look at government spending, what you want to do is have the money spent to where the benefits You spend on the benefits that does the most good for the economy and do government. Now, when the damage done by the last dollar of taxes collected is a less than the benefit done by the last dollar spent, you stop already. That's the right size of government. Anything larger than that is too big and you should shrink it. Anything less than that is too small and you should expand it. Government has a natural role and it has a limited role. It's not all expansive, nor is it zero. So low rate, broad-based, flat tax, spending restraint. Third pillar of prosperity, sound money. You know, there's nothing that can bring an economy to its knees quicker than a weak currency, a hyperinflation, a degradation of the value of the monetary unit. All of these we know from history. So therefore, you have to have a stable valued currency, sound money. If that means convertible, convertible. If you can do it by good monetary policy, fine. But you need to have the stable valued currency that you and I know exactly what a dollar is going to be worth 20 years from now as it is now, so we can contract with each other, so we can make deals and business. So we want to have low rate, broad-based, flat tax, spending restraint, sound money. Now, we all know that we need regulations. Everyone understands that. You can't go and rob stores. You can't drive one day on the left-hand side of the street and the next day on the right. But what you want to make sure when you look at regulations is you want to make sure that they are adjusted for their specific purposes at hand, and they don't go beyond that and cause a lot of collateral damage. Over-regulation can suffocate an economy. Under-regulation can create the Wild West. So you want to have low-rate, broad-based, flat tax, spending restraint, sound money, and minimal regulations. And then lastly, and this is what we just talked about, free trade. There is nothing more important than integrating your economy into the world economy and working in partnership with the rest of the world. Those five, low rate, broad-based, flat tax, spending restraints, sound money, minimal regulations, and free trade, and then get the hell out of the economy. Then you let the people solve it. You have done the job that the government's supposed to do. It's created these, then you remove yourself from it and let the free market solve the problem and create the prosperity and the happiness we all so desperately want. But that's my view of macroeconomics.
Well, let's go through these 5 pillars a little bit more in detail on different subjects, different examples.
Sure, of course.
I am teaching as well as you are, and to the new enrolled students of economics, I often ask just one question. What's the source of the prosperity of the nation? And more often, the answer of the newly enrolled students, 18, 20 years old students, is subsidizes. So what did we do wrong? Where is the mistake?
Yeah, you taught your students wrong.
Our society, especially in the European Union, seems to be thinking about subsidies as the main engine of prosperity, which is for the economists nonsense.
I understand. Yeah? But again, as I said to you, everyone's allowed his or her own opinion, but you're not allowed your own facts. So let's just take a look. I've got this book coming out now, which is called The Taxes Have Consequences. It is the total history of the U.S. income tax from 1913 to the present. We have tax returns, income tax returns, every single one that's been filed in the U.S. We have this huge trove of data and this massive information set there. And we can now look what happens and what happened when people change tax rates. Now, the highest tax in 1913 was 7% when it was put in. It stayed at 7% for 13, 14, and 15. The number of people who were required to file income taxes back then was, I think, 360,000 people. That's in an adult population back then of 64 million. All right. And it went there for this low rate, they put it in at first. Okay. Now, by 1918, we had raised that highest tax rate from 7% to 77%. There we got all the Keynesians in the world together, all the socialists in the world together, and they in 4 years took it from 7% to 77%. and they increased the number of filers 17-fold. 17-fold. It went from 358,000 to about 6.5 million people required to file. What happened? The economy went right straight down. Boom. We were in the middle of World War I. We had a pandemic, and then the election came in 1920. And what happened there? Well, Woodrow Wilson's handpicked candidate, Governor Cox of Ohio, and his running mate, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was the vice presidential candidate back then. They faced Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge. Now, Calvin Coolidge and Warren Harding promised to cut tax rates back to their pre-war level, and Cox and Roosevelt not so much so. They wanted to keep the tax rates high to pay off the debt. They'd reduced the tax from 77 to 73%. Harding and Coolidge won by the largest majority ever in U.S. history, ever. And they cut the tax rates back down to 25%. We had a boom in the economy like you've never seen. It was called the Roaring 20s. Surpluses every single year. Ba-boom, ba-doom, ba-doom. Prosperity, full employment, the U.S. And prices fell during that period. Then we get to 1929. They put in the Smoot-Hawley tariff in the last quarter under Herbert Hoover. All right, he loved the tariffs. He loves protectionism. And he put in the market fell from its peak in September to the end of the year by 35%. It continued falling until it got to 5% of its preceding high. 5%, that's the average. The Great Depression was on. What did we do? We raised the highest tax rate from 25% to 63% in 1932. We reduced the brackets dramatically. We taxed everyone, and the economy went crazily spinning into horrible depression. Unemployment rates up to 25%. We then elected Franklin Delano Roosevelt as president, who took office in March of 1933. He then put on a wealth tax in the U.S. He confiscated all of the American gold at $20.67 an ounce. By law, criminal if you didn't give him the gold. And then 6 months later, he devalued the dollar from $20.67 an ounce to $35 an ounce. Biggest wealth tax. We devalued the dollar against foreign currencies by 60%. They then pushed the highest tax rate up in 1937. We had the highest tax rate up to 79%. And then we pushed it back up to 94%, which I mentioned to you earlier. The Great Depression was caused by taxes, caused by government intervention, and caused by do-gooders who don't understand anything about economics. And they all thought they'd collect more money, but they didn't. There was no money coming. What we know right now on data, now this is not, oh, well, maybe, but whenever you raise tax rates, the highest tax rate on the rich, the economy underperforms. When you lower that tax rates on the rich, the economy outperforms, like in Kennedy, like in Reagan, like in Trump, like in Coolidge and Harding. All of those periods, the economy did really well when we cut tax rates on the rich. That's number one. And when we raised tax rates on the rich, we had the Great Depression, we had World War II, we had all of these, we had the four stooges, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter, the worst combination of, I call it the four stooges, the largest assemblage of bipartisan ignorance ever put on planet Earth. And you have direct relationships with the highest tax rate. I don't care who you are. You cannot argue that raising tax rates doesn't hurt the economy, because that is not true. And I have all the facts to back it. Number two, I've got Saez's and Piketty's little curve. Their income inequality curve, which is the percentage of income attributed to the top 1%. What happens? It is very true that when you raise the highest tax rate, income inequality declines. It's also very true that when you lower the top tax rate, income inequality worsens. It becomes more unequal. The rich get a lot richer. But now look at it more carefully. How does income inequality improve? Well, how it improves is the rich report a lot less income, and the poor report less income too. It's not that the rich get poorer and the poor get richer. No, every single time income inequality improves, more equal society, it's because the rich get poorer faster than the poor get poorer. The poor get hammered when income is equal. And when you cut tax rates, what happens? Income inequality gets worse, quote unquote. But that's because the poor get jobs, but so do the rich. The rich get rich faster. The rich have the ability to change the amount of income they report. They can use lawyers and accountants and deferred income specialists, favor grabbers, lobbyists. I'm sure it's true where you were from too, in Praha. I can't imagine all your politicians are the most honest ever. Now, the next thing is, what happens when you raise tax rates on the rich? We have all of these numbers, data. Every single time you raise tax rates on the rich, revenues go down from the rich. Every single time, even low rates. Every time you lower tax rates on the rich, tax revenues from the rich go up. Duh. What do you, and you hear these politicians saying absolute kvatch. They don't know straight up from sick'em. They don't understand anything, and they're just plain ignorant. Now, then you see the people like Piketty and Saez and the others who don't tell you the other answers. Now, I can't imagine for the moment that all of the research these people have done on income inequality, that they can't tell you honestly that they didn't know that when you raise tax rates on the rich, revenues from the rich go down. It's their numbers I'm using. Okay, they know that. They also know that income equality is achieved by the poor getting poorer, by the poor getting poorer slower than the rich are getting poorer. That's not what you want in society. Now, the last one I'll mention to you is that when they raise tax rates very high, total taxes from the rich as a share of GDP languish. They're just flat, all right? But taxes on the bottom 95%, woo, as a share of GDP go way up. In 1982, when the tax cuts finally occurred, what happened? Tax revenues from the bottom 95% as a share of GDP fell sharply, and tax revenues from the bottom 1%, at the top 1% went way up as a share of GDP. What do you want? I've never seen an argument more clear and more obvious for a low-rate, broad-based flat tax than income inequality, tax revenues, and efficient running. And yet these people tell you they want to tax the rich more. They want their fair share paid. And even if it means killing all the poor people, they don't care. They want to hurt the rich people. And I'm sorry, but rich people are great people, so are poor people. The dream in this world is to make the poor richer, not to make the rich poorer. There's nothing wrong with being rich. There's something very wrong with being poor. And the dream has always been to elevate the poor, not to hurt the rich. Do you follow my view? And that is the way I am. And I'm very upset with my profession because they're absolutely not professionals. They're not looking to the math. They don't look at, I mean, everyone knows we tax speeders on the freeway. Why do we do that? To get them to stop speeding. Why do we tax cigarettes? To get people to stop smoking. Why then do we tax income? To get people to stop earning income? I hope not. Why do we tax employers and employees with a payroll tax? Not to get them to stop employing and employing. Why do we tax companies that make wonderful products at low cost and have huge profits? Why do to get them to stop making wonderful products at low costs? No, we do it to, but don't for a moment believe that taxes don't have the same consequences on income earners, on employers, and on prosperous companies. It makes no sense. You want a low rate, broad-based, flat tax, and then get the hell out of the way. Let the markets solve themselves.
Well, our show has the subtitle that we are free market absolutists. So we completely do agree with you.
Well, but you know, you've got to be free markets because of the numbers, the data. I would be a socialist all the way if people didn't respond to incentives. I would be. I don't care about freedom personally. That's not what drives me. What drives me is economic prosperity. That's what drives me all my life. And the only way you get prosperity is with free markets.
Yeah, exactly.
If you could redistribute income, when I look at all of my kids, and as you probably know, I have lots of kids and lots of grandchildren and lots of great-grandchildren and stuff. I mean, you know, what you do with them is, you know, you don't want to destroy their prosperity. You treat them all equally. And if one does really well, God bless it. If the other one does less well, I wish they did better, but, you know, I'm happy with all of them and their different results. Same thing with countries and economies.
Exactly. Please, let's focus on several taxes. The Czech Republic now is facing the same situation as United States by early 1990s, where was the famous President Bush read my lips pledge, because the new Czech government promised no increase in taxes, no new taxes, but because of the situation we are facing now in Europe, there's the huge discussion about imposing so-called war tax. It should be the taxation of certain companies that are, I'm quoting, currently experiencing exceptional profits, not due to improved services, but because of external events connected to the war. You are advisor, consultant, you are one of the best economists worldwide. What do you think about such kind of the war tax in the 21st century?
I'm going to take your statement as being literally true. I don't know Czech Republic. I don't know any of those things. So I talk to you out of ignorance. So I'm just responding to the words you say to me, nothing else, okay? Wartime taxes don't work. Not only do they not work, at least on the rich and on the successful companies, not only do they not work, they cause huge despair and poverty elsewhere. My view is that you really want to do this. You want to create the prosperity, and you've got to look at the data, and you've got to look. That's why I did my book. No one out there has done the complete history of the U.S. income tax. These people who call themselves the, I don't know, the redistribution, Zuckman, you know Zuckman and Sancheva, and you know who Piketty is, you know who Saez is, all of these people who advise all the socialist governments all over the world, they tell you how to tax and get money from the rich. They're just totally wrong. The rich have all sorts of ways of not paying taxes. They can go to different locations. They can change the composition of their income. They can change the timing of their income. They can change the volume of their income. They can change how they report it. They can hire lawyers. They can hire accountants. All of these. The government must deal with the world the way it is, not the way the government thinks it should be. And you get people who are ignorant, who are running for office, who make statements like this to appease the masses, and they ruin countries. And they ruin them time in, time out. And I can't help you on that in your country, but I can help it here in the US. And we're stopping it here in the US. But I'm very sorry for you. You know, the way you've described it now, I feel very sorry for you. My condolences go to you. I don't know what to tell you. Dumb politicians will do dumb things.
We just should mention that your book, Tax of Consequences and Income Tax History of the United States, will be published by the end of September.
Yes.
So we are really looking forward to it.
Well, you can pre-order. You can pre-order it if you want to on Amazon.
Oh,
you just did? Oh, well, you can do that. I think it's the highest pre-order book in there. We're #1 in all of income inequality books. And, you know, it should be #1 because it's a stupid argument that you raise taxes on the rich and you make the poor better off. How silly. Have you ever been employed by a poor person? No. You know, rich people are the essence of our society. Without Bill Gates, we wouldn't have computers. Without Elon Musk, we wouldn't have Tesla. You know, these people are the people who create the movement of prosperity. They're not our enemies. They're our friends. And the sooner you've got to make a tax code that everyone likes. It can't be one group against another group. Let me just put it this way. If you make 10 times as much as I do, and you probably do, you should pay 10 times as much in taxes as I do. You probably don't. You know, a flat tax is fair. That's what I did with Jerry Brown when he ran for president in the Democratic primary. We almost won.
Let's stay with the taxes. The last question about taxes, when we are moving away from that. In the European Union, but also I think worldwide, but in the European Union, which is the Czech Republic now in charge of the presidency, so-called presidency, there's discussion about carbon tax, digital tax, and financial transaction tax, the all good Tobin tax, of course, we know for decades. What do you think about such new supranational or even global taxes?
Let me talk about a carbon tax. I don't want to do the digital tax or the other one because they're silly. There is a very significant argument that is made by scientists. I don't know if it's true or not, but I can tell you they make an argument that too much carbon in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases has caused global warming, That in turn has made the weather patterns of the world much less good. And I am not an expert in this field. I'm not. I'm a very good friend of Al Gore's. As you probably know, he lives right nearby. When Al Gore did his book, The Future, I was one of the 3 people to write the blurbs on the book. E.O. Wilson did, Berners-Lee did, and so did I. I think Al Gore is one of the most brilliant, wonderful creed, but I do not know about global warming. It's not my, but that having been said, I believe there is far more of a risk of too much carbon in the atmosphere than too little carbon. So therefore, anything that does that cleans the air, I really do like. So Al Gore and I talked about a set of policies. A carbon tax will distort and shift away from the use of carbon, fossil fuels, towards alternative sources, and maybe even to less use of energy altogether, okay? The problem with a carbon tax is really simple. It will kill the economy. So a carbon tax will make you use less carbon, but it will also kill the economy. It will cause way downturn in the economy. So how do you solve that problem? Well, we know that if you take the carbon tax and put on a carbon tax and replace that carbon tax with a reduction of the income tax, if you dollar for dollar impose a carbon tax and dollar for dollar reduce the income tax so that you offset the damage done to the economy by a carbon tax, you will have a better growing economy and a cleaner economy. What's wrong with that? It's the way markets are solved. That's what you do. And I have taken that to all the Democratic senators in the US, and literally, and everyone said, no, we need to raise the revenues to keep all the money in government. You know, Al Gore and I agreed that we'd have a carbon tax with an offset of an income tax or a payroll tax, which would be the right thing to do. And I would support that every day of the week and twice on Sundays. That's the way to go. Use incentives and then let the market solve the problem. Don't put these credits in and offsets and blah, 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 clean windows and put it. That's stupid. Just let people solve it themselves. Get the prices right and then back off. If people want to put more things around their caulk around their windows, God bless them. If they want to put black pipes on their roofs, God bless them. If they want to drive a little teeny tiny car with no gas or pedal, God bless them. Let them make the decisions as to what is best for them given the correct prices, and you will get the right answers.
When we are reading the newspapers daily, in the European Union, the title pages are occupied by the Russia-Ukraine war. When we are reading the United States, Austria, Chinese, and so on papers, it's at page 8, 10, 12. It doesn't seem to be the topic one, but you have a very special knowledge on it, because in 2015 you were appointed by the Minister of Finance of Ukraine to advise her on a tax reform. So you, in specific time, in a very specific period, could touch it a little. So what do you think? Did you succeed in that? What did you achieve? Do you have some better knowledge, better insight in this problem?
I did not know you went that far in your research to know what I've done in all these places. Oh my God. It's now you scare me. Do you know what I had for breakfast yesterday?
Unfortunately not.
Oh, good. I just wonder how far your research goes. I went over there. I was very, Ukraine's a real problem. It has always been a problem. As you may remember, the prime minister of the Ukraine, or the president, I don't remember which, was a pro-Russian, but he was a crook. And then he had all the zoo animals. Then they threw him out. He was advised by Paul Manafort, who was then later on Trump's advisor. Then we got Poroshenko. We got, all of those there. When I looked at Ukraine, Ukraine needs a lot of time and a lot of good policies, just the way I outlined to you. I spent a little bit of time with Klitschko, who was the mayor of Kiev at the time. By the way, I have a picture of Klitschko right up here on the wall. You should see it. I'm short and he's tall. And my face gets right into his tummy. He's way up there. But Ukraine is a cauldron of bad policies, of social discontent the highest suicide rate, the largest outmigrate. I mean, there isn't a problem on this earth that Ukraine doesn't have. And I feel very sorry for that part of the world. I don't know how to handle the situation with Russia, the Donbass, Crimea, all of that stuff, except on the economics. And, you know, I can tell you how to do it, but there's no way that the government, which is loaded, just loaded with corruption, and the corruption at the border on I mean, I can't begin to tell you how deeply embedded corruption was in Ukraine when I was there. And all of these other people that I was with, almost all of them were trying to exploit that corruption rather than help it. And I was very disappointed in the whole efforts to help Ukraine, because people weren't there to help them. People were there to try to exploit the corruption, to take advantage of the people of Ukraine. And I don't know how to tell you. If I were the ruler of Ukraine, I could create their prosperity in 30 years. I could. But the way it's run and the way that power is dissipated, it's just a terrible situation. And then they've made it even worse with a land war in Europe. We need another land war in Europe like we need a hole in the head. And you've got this thing going on, and you've got every politician pounding his chest and pretending they're macho. You know, it's just disgusting. And it's one of the most tragic things I've ever seen in my life. And I cry, and I don't know how to stop it. I just pray that we have set aside an off-ramp so that Russia can pull out of Ukraine, or at least not advance further, and we can come to some sort of peace for a while and perhaps bring in rationality. But a land war in Europe is not a good thing. And believe me, all of these countries, and we'll fight with you, and what? That's not the way to win. That isn't. The way to win is through peace and through prosperity and through love, not through hate. End of my lecture. Sorry.
Rozumím. Četli jsme váš starší text z roku 2014, kde jste zmínil, že je důležité diskutovat a že je špatný nápad, cituji, vykopnout Rusko z G8, protože pokud chceme diskutovat, musíme se snažit o společnou práci. Naše země byla Ruskem okupována, ale přesto věřím, že diskuze je vždy lepší než boj.
Thank you. That is so true. And you know, I can tell you some of the wonderful stories from the real president, the one I worked with all my life, Ronald Reagan. I can remember the discussion he told me about Geneva and what happened when he and Gorbachev went down to the little cabin with the fireplace, just the two of them with their translator. That's the way to solve the world. When we did the Reykjavik thing with Russia, they're under control of nuclear weapons. You know, you've got to be friends. You've got to trust each other, and through trust, develop this relationship that allows you to bring down the threat of war, to bring down this threat, and to solve problems rather than fight over them. And, you know, sometimes you got to fight, but, you know, that's a last resort. And someday, maybe if we do one, I'll tell you some of the cool personal stories with Ronald Reagan on Russia that you'd find really interesting. The way he approached them, the way he dealt with them, the way he dealt with Gorbachev. I mean, it's beautiful to see how a sincere, honest, smart man can win without fighting. Whenever you fight, you always lose. You may not lose as much as the guy you beat up. You may not, but you lose. You know, just because you silence someone doesn't mean you've convinced them. You know, this is where you have to try to understand what their point of view is, and then work with their point of view as well as your point of view, and see if you can't find some common ground other than shooting each other. Well, you see my view of the world. I'm not a wartime president. I'm not a wartime economist.
Možná proto byl prezident Reagan pro tolik českých ekonomů tím skutečným hrdinou. Velmi dobře si uvědomujeme, že to byl právě on, Jan Pavel II. A prezident Gorbačov, kdo nám pomohli znovu získat ekonomickou a politickou svobodu.
Yeah, it was not Jimmy Carter and Joe Biden. Believe me, it was not.
Exactly.
And it probably wasn't the current Pope either.
Ale přesto oba jsme zvyklí uvažovat i o takových věcech v ekonomických termínech. Pojďme se podívat na data. Neznám podrobná čísla o lobbystech ve Spojených státech, ale přesto vidíme obrovský vliv například farmaceutické lobby, vojenské lobby a tak dále. Myslíte si, že je možné tuto lobby zlomit ve prospěch obchodu a tím pádem ve prospěch míru? Nebo je to nad síly jednoho člověka?
No, it's not above the power at all. Yeah, I told you about the breaking of the setting of the monopolistic rules in the stock exchange. You know, every share was required by law to be at 31 cents a share. Now it's zero. Free markets. We had trucking deregulation. We had airline deregulation. We now have much safer air travel, much less expensive air travel. I could go on and on and on. The President Trump gave me credit for transparency on healthcare. You should know what the prices are at the hospital. What is the price of all these things? How much do I have to pay? And what are the consequences of those? What's the quality of the product? When you walk in and buy toothpaste, you know what it costs, you know what it does. You should have that same thing for healthcare. So we put through an executive order which required hospitals to post all their prices and to post the results from their procedures. And we're making headway there. We'll get there. And that's one of the biggest areas that needs to be deregulated and to be brought under free markets, but we'll get it. It's a constant push and pull to get the world to be a better place, but don't ever give up hope. Don't ever give up hope. We're going to succeed in all of these things. We're going to get free markets in hospitals. That means life expectancies will increase dramatically. Costs will go way down. Healthcare should be a product just like everything else. It's like schools. It's like, merit pay for teachers. Teachers who teach well should be paid more than teachers who don't teach well. And we should select teachers not by the unions, but by their merit pay. Everyone knows which teachers are the best. The students know. The other teachers know. And the administrators know. Well, pay them correctly. We should also have merit pay for politicians. If the politicians cause the economy to tank, they shouldn't get any pay. In fact, if they do a bad enough job, they should pay us back. If they do really well, they should get triple their. All politicians should be put on commission. And you should have a very simple payment plan for politicians, just like you do for corporate executives. Two companies, Company A and Company B. Company A, all the officers and directors of the company have big salaries, and they own no stock, and they have no stock options. Company B, the same company. All of them have much lower pay. They all have a lot of stock and they own a lot. Which one would you like to invest in? You should make government just like that. I have no problem with politicians making lots and lots of money, as long as I do too. And if the economy grows at 3%, give them their pay. The economy grows at 4%, give them double their pay. The economy grows at 5%, give them triple their pay. But if the economy grows at 2%, no pay. Economy grows at 1%, they owe us the money we would have paid them. They'll behave very differently. They won't vote for the crap they vote for now. They wouldn't do this build back better and raising taxes. No, they know better than that. So once you put them on commission, you'll find out very quickly they'll change how they behave and they'll start serving us rather than trying to dictate to us. The Janet Yellens of this world and all these other people will disappear. And you'll get people that really know how to. We'll get the Elon Musks of politicians coming in and creating huge prosperity. Merit pay for politicians, merit pay for government employees, merit pay all the way. Simple, easy to understand merit pay. And we do that in all areas, and you'll see this world blossom as never before. Merit pay, we should know what it costs to get healthcare services. We shouldn't have a government healthcare service. Now, let me tell you, there's a very good role for government in healthcare. No one's willing to let someone die on the street. If they can't afford. So catastrophic insurance, that makes all the sense in the world to have either a government provide product of catastrophic insurance, or you're required to buy private insurance, whichever way, because no one wants that weird 1 in a million very expensive thing to ruin family. No one wants that. Then you want to make sure you have transparency. This is transparency there all the way down. You must know what the product costs, what it does, and have truth in that transparency. And that should be regulated very precisely. And lastly, for those of us who, for whatever reason, can't make it in this planet, I mean, you got to have healthcare clinics for the poor who can't do it. Of course you do. But aside from catastrophic insurance, transparency, and healthcare, get the hell out of the healthcare business. You know, you have money and you can choose whether you want to use it for your kids, for your house, for restaurants, or for your healthcare. And you make far better decisions for you than some stupid bureaucrat in government. You're much better at doing that, though that's not where they should be. But they should be there with catastrophic. They should be there with transparency, and they should be there with health clinics for the very poor, the people who can't help themselves. But that's it. Well, and the same thing with welfare. I mean, you know, of course you should have unemployment benefits for people who, through no fault of their own, they were thrown out, but only for a few weeks, only for a small amount, just to make it through till they get their next job. And, you know, for people who can't do themselves, of course you have it. But the last thing you ever want is to have welfare such that it creates its own need. If you pay people to be poor, they will be poor. Let me just say this last one to you because it'll shock your audience. But if you tax people who are rich and you pay people who are poor, you're going to get lots and lots of poor people and no rich people. The dream in America has never been to make the rich poor. It's been to make the poor rich. You want to make sure your incentives don't create the very poverty that you're trying to cure. And that's what's happening under Joe Biden. That's what happened under Jimmy Carter. That is not what happened under Ronald Reagan or Jack Kennedy or Bill Clinton or Donald Trump. But we're going through these battles.
Isn't that let's say, failure of us economics in our profession? I will give you just one example. Yeah? During the COVID crisis, during the first phase of it, 2020, a lot of economists in Europe, in the United States, in the Czech Republic, were supporting the growth of government debt. I can't remember that with my colleagues. We were writing an open letter to all members of parliament, to the Czech president and so on, with request not to increase the debt. I know that you were speaking in the same tone, but the biggest famous names in Germany, sometimes United States and United Kingdom, were just telling we should be pouring the money into the economics. Now we have the inflation. So, however, media were silent about economics who cry for the responsible thinking, but they were supporting this cries for the new money in economics. Why? Why was there such a huge support of wasting money? Did we as economists failed once again, or how can you explain to yourself?
I will explain it very simply to you. They don't understand economics, these famous professors. They've never worked for a living in their lives. They don't get paid based upon the competence of their work. I watched all of these people, Austin Goolsbee and all of them, lockdown test, blah, 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 and it just shows. Irving Kristol said it beautifully, and let me, if I can, say the way Irving Kristol said it. It takes a PhD in economics not to be able to understand the obvious. How can you have a theory that you can spend your way into prosperity, that you can tax your way into wealth? I mean, these economists are not qualified. They don't live in a world where they are judged by their economic competence. And they are just people who studied economics and came into economics so they could control your lives and steal your companies. That is, you know, I come from a wealthy family, as you probably know, from generations. And I went into economics the same way the old English did, into like Darwin or any of the others. I went into it because I loved the topic, not because I wanted to use it as a tool of furthering my career. My colleagues, by the way, use it as a tool to further their careers. And the only way they can become relevant is if they recommend extreme policies that work. You know, if the economist says, just keep your hands off the economy, who's going to hire that person? You've got to say, do something. I love the way Reagan put it, and I'll tell you the Reagan quote, and this is in '87 when the stock market crashed, and he said, "Don't just stand there, undo something. Don't do something, undo something." And you know, he who governs best governs least. And unfortunately, these people studied it. And you know Paul Krugman, you know Austin, you know all of these people, Jason Berman. I could go through all of their names, all of them in Europe, especially German economists. I mean, I studied in Germany, as you may know, at the University of Munich, and that was in 1967 through 1970. In fact, I got the Alumni of the Year Award from the University of Munich 10 years ago, the Hans Müller Award. But they all are top-down economists who want to control the economy. They don't understand that the economy knows better what's good for it than you do. You know, you are a limited individual human, and you don't know the whole essence of the universe. Don't stick your hands in. I jokingly, can I do my joke? In our social set in California with Reagan and my godfather, Justin Dart, and all of us, Jimmy Stewart and Charlton Heston, and you know all, that was our social set in there. And that's how we got Reagan, and that's how I got to know Reagan. I didn't do it because he picked me out of a big crowd. I'll take the little short fat one over there. No, I got it by privilege. And I'd always prefer getting something by privilege than actually working for it. Just joking. And Charlton Heston and I used to have lunch with him every month. Absolutely wonderful. You remember his movie, The Planet of the Apes, where he comes out of the spaceship and he jumps on the ground and in his spacesuit, and he sees all these sort of humanoid creatures out in a field of corn, picking corn, you know, and he runs down to say hello. And of course, then the nets pop over him. All these nets pop over him, and all these apes, the bonobos and the chimpanzees and the orangutans and the gorillas all come down and grab him. You remember that scene? And he sits there and he said something like, "Keep your stinking monkey paws off me, you dirty apes." I have my version of his quote. "Keep your socialist monkey paws off my economy, you dirty left-winger." The best thing to do is remove problems. Do you know your Latin at all? In Latin, my vision of the truth is primum non nocere. First of all, do no harm. Now, it's true that if some guy has a green thing growing out of his ear, and the last 10,000 people with green things growing out of their ears died, that maybe you would then recommend surgery to cut the green thing off the ear. Okay? I'm not saying don't do anything ever, but use 6 Sigma before you do. Make sure you're not doing damage. The second Latin phrase I just love more than life itself, is when you see an economy like Ukraine. You talked to me about Ukraine. You talked to me about Chile when we went down there in the late 70s and did the revolution there, or the revolution I was down with in Argentina with Menem, or the revolution with Lady Thatcher. As you know, I worked with Lady Thatcher very closely, or the revolution we're going to do in Cuba, but we never got to there because my guy died and the bad guy lived. But, you know, the phrase is, when you go into these economies, is vis medicatrix naturae. It's called the healing powers of nature. The best way of let the autoimmune system take care of your body. Sit there and encourage the autoimmune system. Don't circumvent it. We have, through billions of years of evolution, developed this wonderful thing called the economy, this wonderful thing called the human body, this wonderful thing called nature and all the different species, this wonderful thing called the universe and how it's all worked. You know, pull your hands out and let the natural order of things try. Now, if the natural order of things doesn't truly work, like in monopoly cases, or yes, then you do, but you do it very delicately, very targeted. Do not do these broad-based, stupid things. Create a sound money. Everyone knows how to do this. Everyone knows. We did it for centuries. Why are we having a Fed now that's trying to use price controls? Let interest rates go to where they should go. Now, with inflation running at 8 or 9%, you probably are going to have a 10-year bond yield at 14, 15%. That's where it should be. But oh no, my Fed says lower interest rates. They buy all the government debt. And so you wonder why now the Fed's balance sheet is $9 trillion when 12 years ago, 15 years ago, was $800 billion. I mean, you know, they're trying to interfere everywhere they go. Stop. Get your stinking socialist paws off me, my economy, you dirty left-wing ape. You know, just keep your hands off my economy. Let you decide what's good for you, not me. I don't know what's good for you. When I see a crowd, let's say you see the Who in London, you know, the singing group, the Who, the band, you see this crowd of 500,000 people. All these hands up, all these people screaming. It's very hard to think of them as individuals, but they are. If you focus down on one person, you'll see a person named Mary, and she has her hair cut this way. She likes fried eggs. She drinks an orange juice, and she has a boyfriend, and she has a job. She's a person. She has a will. She has a brain. She has neurons. She has all of this. She knows far better what's good for Mary than I do. And there are 500,000 of them out there. And then there are 5 million out there. Then there are 50 million. Then there are 500 million. Then there are 5 billion. Every single one of those little people know what's best for them rather than you do or I do. What you need to do is have an overlay, low rate, broad-based flat tax, spending restraint. Government does some things well. Sound money, a valued currency that has value stable, minimal regulations. Don't do these lockdowns in COVID. I'm 82 years old. I know very well that I'm a very high-risk person for COVID-19. I'm not stupid. So am I going to run out in crowds where people are coughing and little green things are floating? Hell no. I know. Don't go there. I don't run drunk across the freeway either. That's not smart. You know, I don't climb ladders up to the 7th-story buildings and do dances. I don't like dying. I don't like the thought. I know to take care of you don't need to tell me what my COVID protocol is. Now, I was the first person to get vaccines because I really believe in vaccines. I really think, but they shouldn't be required by law. You should be made available. Do you want a vaccine? Well, you judge the risks yourself and see if you do. Now, if you don't have one, maybe you have a little band that says this person's not vaccinated, but don't stop them from doing that. They know what's best for them. And lastly, free trade. Minimal regulations, free trade, and then get out of the economy. You know, the one thing I really dislike about Europe, and, you know, as you probably know, I love Europe. I lived in Germany. I used to speak it totally fluently, and I was thinking of actually moving to Germany and living there, except for the academic world is very regimented, and it wasn't open to innovation like the US is. And, but the one thing I really think is a mistake is the EU. You know, this is not, you and I believe in free markets, an infinite number of suppliers, an infinite number of demanders of a product, where the price of that product is the marginal utility, it's the marginal cost, you know, all the perfect conditions for perfect competition, maximizing utility. You and I are trained to do that. But nowhere is the perfect model of competition more important than it is with government. We think about it as producers of eggs or bananas or whatever else, but it's also the production of government services. And whenever politicians agree with each other to do something, it's always to exploit the electorate, to create a monopoly against it. I would not allow the European Union. I would ask for every country to have its own tax policies. Maybe they want a common currency like my friend Bob Mundell wanted, but that's their choice. You know, which currency they want. But, you know, this collusion of government, a minimum corporate tax. You guys want a zero tax? God bless you. If you want to subsidize corporate, we'll see who wins. If yours is a better plan, you'll get more corporations coming in, you'll be more prosperous. If you've done a stupid plan, they'll all come to my country. You know, competition amongst governments is more important by far than competition amongst companies and amongst individuals and amongst products. It's the essence. Now, we have in my country here, we have 50 individual states. We have probably 80 counties in each of those states. We have probably 3 municipalities each. We have a trove of data that goes back a century. Each state must allow anyone to move into the state as long as that person will abide by the laws of that state. So we have complete free mobility of labor and people, complete free. We have a common language. We have the Commerce Clause, which says no states may discriminate against products from any other state and cannot put up barriers. And this is the perfect cauldron of competition. Guess which states do the best? Those that have no income tax. There are 9 of them there. We're beating the living hell out of those with the highest income tax. All the people are moving into Tennessee, into Florida, into New Hampshire. All right. Those states that have introduced an income tax, they are the worst performing states in the nation. We have this huge call, and it's all competition amongst governments. That's what we should have in the world. You guys shouldn't have to abide by something out of Brussels. Who the hell is Brussels? Some bunch of goofs who are trained in some professorship that don't understand straight up from Sikkim again? No, you need the individual countries. You want them significant size so their economies of scale are all achieved and all that. But you want competition amongst governments much more than you want competition amongst companies. And therefore, I really think the world of Europe has deteriorated dramatically. Now, I gave this speech in Slovakia. Remember, every one of the European countries has hosts the EU conference every 6 months. So I think it's every 12 years, each country, whatever it is. And they asked me to do the keynote in Bratislava. And I gave this speech that I just did to you, saying it's far more important that we have competition amongst governments than amongst government competition is where competition is really needed. And half the crowd booed and the other half cheered. But you have this conflict. You have the people who want to control you, and you have the people who don't want to be controlled. You've got to choose your own path. But low rate, broad-based flat tax, spending restraint, sound money, minimal regulations, free trade. Go home and enjoy life. Read a book, raise your kids, have a glass of wine and party on the rooftop of but don't try to control my life. And I'm not saying that out of freedom like Milton Friedman did or like Hayek did or these others. I don't give a damn about freedom. I give a damn about prosperity. And that's the way to create prosperity. You don't have to sort of call some ancient religious view of freedom. No, I don't want the freedom to starve. And if regulations are required to create more prosperity, I'm all for those regulations. But they don't usually. You follow what I'm saying? I hope you do. It's really important.
I did, because we are for a long time trying to say the same things, unfortunately, in the European Union. And the trouble is that the folk do understand perfectly what you've said. Part of economists know it, but is bribed by the EU funds, the research grants and so on. So they often tell you, okay, you are right, but don't beat the hand which is fitting you. Yeah? And then you have the politicians who loves to, some of them, outsource the responsibility for governing their own country. Yeah? And the question we are solving very long time is if the disintegration of the European Union can be peaceful and can be proper to the people, or if it will be covered in blood. Yeah?
Well, here you go. I gave a talk at the OECD a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic, and I thought it was very ironic that all these people talking about equality and they were smoking their little cigarettes, they were sipping their coffees. It used to be Gaulois, I don't know what it is now. They all their suits, they all oh yes, you competent. All of these people sort of playing with each other, and they did it inside of the Rothschild mansion, which they now own. I thought it really interesting that the whole conference on income equality was held in the Rothschild. Just, the hypocrisy of Europe is even worse than the US. And that says something, but we're hypocritical. But you guys are really hypocritical. And it's amazing. And they pay people to write socialist dogmas. They have, all of these are government organizations. All of these are tax subsidized universities. There's never been a professor in Europe who's actually worked for a living. You get paid a lot for saying some stupid theory that gets all this press coverage rather than does something good. In the market, if you're buying a stock, you pay for it. and it goes down, you lose. If you buy the stock and it goes up, you win. You're disciplined instantaneously. But in a professor, no. That's why I want merit pay for teachers. If you're teaching your class and no students show up, you don't get paid. If you're teaching your class, just like the old Greek universities were, they came and they gave you money to lecture to them. That's the way it should be now. But no, it's not that. The OECD is this big socialist organization run on other people's money. And they all sit there and talk about how wonderful they are with their little sips of coffee and their Agawa cigarettes and their little cookies. And they act like little asses. All of them pretending to be intellectuals, but they're pretending. You follow what I'm saying? Please do. It's a disgusting system that we've created of education. That's why you have all of these professors who recommend all of these bad policies. They've never worked for a living. The only reason they ever get hired for consulting jobs is because a private company wants to curry favors with the government to get a subsidy. Not because these guys can actually create a better product. No. It's just amazing.
All the problems you mentioned, I can see that it's not the education which develops the art and ciencia, as economic used to be. It doesn't improve the intellect. It's just about, like the army system. One step, second step, better step, higher money, and so on. But nothing about the passion for understanding. Yeah. And the question is how to push at least part of us back to this passion from this, let's say, competition, this point collecting system of our so-called research and development, which has nothing in common with research and development nowadays.
Yeah. What you say is, and I would guess that even the private universities in the Czech Republic are subsidized by government. They're tax exempt. They are here. I've never taught in a state-run enterprise at Stanford, as you know, my PhD in undergraduate at Yale, and I taught at Chicago. I taught at the university. Yeah, and I've never taken money from a politician. When you talk about my background, the last time I worked for government, got paid was in 1970 to 72. When I was the chief economist of the White House under George Shultz. And I learned then that I should never take money from government. So with all those years with Reagan, where everyone associates me with Reagan, I never took a penny from him or government, ever. The reasons he couldn't fire me, he couldn't double my pay, he couldn't have my pay. And it allowed me to say what I believed was correct. Same thing with Trump. I've never gotten paid by government at all. These politicians, these economists, your friends, my friends, who work for government. Now, let me say this very carefully to you. They will rebut arguments they know to be true in order to curry favors with their political benefactors. Once you take money from a politician, the politician owns you. That politician does. So when you look at these people, and I could give you all the people right now, they say stuff they know it's not true. But they say it because they're currying favors with their political groups. They will write research projects they know are not correct because they're being paid. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. All these things. That is I have never done that. The reason I was so powerful with Reagan over all of his other official economists, I'd go in and I'd meet with him every month for a couple of hours, and then I'd go home. And I paid my own way. I paid it, but it's because I didn't have a dog in the fight. I didn't have a paycheck I needed. In fact, with Trump, I can tell you, and I won't tell you who it was there, but every time he'd ask me to walk with him for the whole day, because he enjoyed my company, because I'm not being paid by him. You know, the people in the White House were scared of him. I'd sit there next to the other people, and the other people would be like this, because they need him for their paycheck. I don't. I didn't need Reagan for my paycheck. I didn't need Kennedy for my paycheck. I didn't need Trump for my paycheck. I told them what I really thought was right. And there were many times that Reagan would get upset with me or Trump would get upset with me. You know, but so what? to hell with you if you don't like my advice. But they knew I was telling them what I thought they should be doing. And the relationship is extremely strong as a result of that. And I was able to succeed. All of the economists with Reagan wanted him to raise taxes after 81, 82. He didn't. You know, all of these, and it worked out beautifully. And with Trump the same way, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. You know, the problem is when the pandemic came with Trump, he and everyone else in government got panicked. And let me just say this to you, because it's my experience that's, I think, so important. Whenever politicians make decisions, when they are either panicked or drunk, the consequences are rarely attractive. And that's what happens when something, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? Let's do something. You know, at that time, what you do is you say, put your hands over your ears, shut your eyes, say, I'm not listening, I'm not listening. You know, within a week, the panic will be good. And then you can make clear and good decisions. When politicians make decisions in a panic mode, grab your wallet and run to the basement, because it ain't going to be pretty. And you see, all of these people have used the pandemic or the war in Ukraine or whatever this excuse is this week. World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. They create these crises so they can gather more and more control. And you know, our job, yours and mine, is to stop them from doing this and to reverse those things. Now, I started off my conversation with you, but we have made huge progress. Please don't think that because today's crisis, today's panic, today's is so bad that we haven't made great progress over the years. We are defeating these people issue by issue. We've solved the tax rate problem, not completely, but we brought it down. We brought the tax rates down under Reagan from 11 to 2. We brought the highest tax rate down from 70% to 28%. Tell me that's not wonderful. We drew up the corporate rate from 46 to 34%. We now got it to 20%. I mean, we're making huge progress. We just have to keep the fight. You and I need to keep going and explaining the truth to these people. Sooner or later, they'll get it. And they will. And we're making great progress. I mean, I was born in Youngstown, Ohio, and Steeltown. And I lived in Cleveland. When I was a kid, Lake Erie, the lake that we are, one of the Great Lakes, was so polluted that if Christ had come back to the earth to prove that in fact he were, and happened to land in Cleveland, to prove that in fact he were the Christ, he would not have to walk on the water. Hell, anyone could walk on the water back then. He'd have to sink in the water. You know, now the lake is clean. That is a very good role for government. The bald eagle, our national bird, was almost extinct. And we got it through the reduce of DDT and certain other things. It's now back to being flourishing. I mean, we're making huge progress. We're increasing this. I mean, and this is where government's good. We're making a good change of the earth. Recognize what government can do and what it can't do. And what is the private sector's role and what is the public sector's role. That's what we're supposed to do. And that's what you and I are doing. And I'm very proud to be on your show. And I'm very proud to see how you've handled yourself. And we're going to win this war. And whether it's this generation or the next generation or whatever it is, we'll get rid of all these fuzzy wuzzy bad economists who don't understand anything. And we'll replace them with good ones. And the world will advance step by step. And I'm very confident that. Now, you told me I was an optimist. You're correct. I really believe in the good of mankind and that we will solve these problems. They scare me, though. But that's where we go.